Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
He is an American advocate for health insurance payment reform. He is former health insurance industry executive, a communication director. He is a New York Times bestselling author of Nation on the Take, How Big Money Corrupts Our Democracy and What We Can Do About It. And the second book, Deadly Spin, an insurance company insider speaks out on how. A critic of HMOs and the tactics used by health insurers, Wendell Potter is one of our leading national advocates for major reforms of the health insurance industry, including a supporter of Medicare for All and universal health care. He is a voice that every American must hear. Wendell Potter, welcome to Politics Done Right.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on again.
Let me tell you, I think more than ever, especially today, we're a few days away from the 7th. People need to learn a whole lot about what Medicare is, what Medicare Advantage is as well, and how insurance companies are corrupting what Medicare was supposed to be. So my first question to you is, why did we ever need Medicare, just traditional Medicare?
We needed it because insurance companies were just not interested in selling health insurance people to senior citizens, people as they got older. If they were charging premiums so high that people just couldn't afford it. So we had a real crisis of our senior citizens being deep in poverty in many cases. Only a small number of our senior citizens were able to buy health insurance at that time. So you have an enormous number of people who had reached 65 or older who just didn't have any insurance at all. That was why. And it's because, again, insurance companies were just not interested in selling them anything because they knew that as you get older, you're more likely to need more care. And so they just pretty much blackball people.
Now, how did we pay for this? In other words, one of the reasons that the insurance companies didn't sell to people of elderly is, again, it costs too much. The people couldn't afford it. So the government created a particular way to pay for it that actually works. So what was that?
Yeah, and it's a publicly funded program, has been since its inception. That means it's funded with our money that we pay in taxes in one form or another. And we have, if we work, we notice that we have deductions from our paycheck that goes to the Medicare Trust Fund that builds up over the years. So as we're of working age, we pay into that. And then when we reach retirement age, it's there for us. We pay for this in our earlier years and take advantage of it. If we live to be that old, if we reach our mid-60s, it's there for us.
Now, what that means then is what the insurance companies couldn't pay for because, again, it was more individualized. Because we did it as a collective, we were able to collect enough money from the entire society to pay for the health care of all of us as we get older. Something that went from let's call it, from the able-bodied to the not so able-bodied, correct?
That's right. In fact, it's basically the system that works around the world and actually worked initially for a brief period of time in this country. Our system of health insurance began in the late 1920s, early 1930s on the West Coast with Kaiser Permanente and its system of integrated care, which was kind of the forerunner of HMOs, and what was the forerunner of the Blue Cross system in Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas. And the health insurance at that time was what's called community rating. Everybody, regardless of age or health, paid the same amount of money. And that worked until big insurance companies saw an opportunity to come into the market and make money by siphoning off younger and healthier people into away from that. And so that destroyed the whole concept of community rating.
Now, the reason I wanted to start there is I wanted people to understand how Medicare came into being. The private sector refused to cover people. The government, we the people, found a way in which we could collectively take care of people. So now there was a funding mechanism, as you just explained, even tried earlier on with Kaiser as well, a tried and true mechanism that worked successfully.
Yeah.
Now, what is your expertise? You were what we call for quite some time the whistleblower for insurance companies. Tell us a little bit about that, because when I move into Medicare Advantage, I want to use some of that as you being the authority on the subject.
Yeah, I worked inside the insurance industry for 20 years. It was not my first career. I was a newspaper reporter, a journalist in my first career, but I was kind of lured into public relations work because it's a higher paying profession generally. And I wound up doing quite well. And I was recruited first to work for Humana, which is a very large insurance company. And I was there for 4 years. And then from there, I was recruited to Cigna, and I was there for more than 15 years. So altogether, about 2 decades working inside two of the biggest insurance companies. They're both for-profit. They're both listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And I got a great education of what that really means to people who are enrolled in these plans and what it means to our healthcare system. Like I said, in the early years of the last century, and from 1929 to into the 30s, there were very few for-profit insurance companies. In fact, almost all of the Blue Cross plans operated on a nonprofit basis until the 1990s, and then some of them began converting to for-profit status. So a lot of people don't realize that, and not so many years ago, health insurance in this country was on a nonprofit basis. But now it's been taken over by these companies like Cigna and Humana and United Health Group and Aetna, which is owned by CVS, and a few others. There are 7 large for-profit corporations that control both the Medicare Advantage business and commercial insurance. So we are kind of captive in this system now, and we're our healthcare system, and certainly our system of health insurance, is controlled by Wall Street. I saw that up close during my time at Cigna, because one of my responsibilities was to handle financial communications. I had to know all about how the company made money and where it went, and who really are the most important stakeholders for the company. And it became abundantly clear that the most important stakeholder for these companies are investors, institutional investors, and a small number of Wall Street financial analysts. They're the ones that the CEO and the CFO pay most attention to, and they worship it at the New York Stock Exchange.
So, what does that mean for the average recipient of healthcare services from an insurance company? What does that mean to them? How does the insurance company then make its money?
Well, they make their money because there is, for most of us, no Medicare that's available to us. So it's the only game in town for those of us who are not eligible for a Medicare or Medicaid program or a VA program. So the vast majority of Americans have to get insurance from one of these companies, or some, there are still a few remaining nonprofit health plans, including a few nonprofit blues plans. But what people need to understand is that what Wall Street wants is not what we need. Wall Street wants these companies to pay less and less on our claims, and to refuse more care, to deny more care year in and year out. Because the less these companies pay in claims, the more money is left over to reward those shareholders, to make them richer, to enhance the value of their shares. So that's what it's all about, and that's why you see so many people these days uh, not getting the care that they need. They're not getting the care that they need because insurance companies are engaging in a practice called prior authorization, in which they will overrule what your doctor says you need and will refuse to cover medically necessary care. Often is not an outright denial as much as it is a delay, and in many cases that's just as bad because if you're sick, you need in many cases care right away. You can't afford not to get care right away. But they also make you pay a lot of money out of your own pocket before your coverage kicks in these days. Not only do we have to pay thousands of dollars every year in premiums, but they now make you pay hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars out of your own pocket before your coverage kicks in. So that's a deterrent from people even using their health insurance. They can't use it because they can't afford to meet those deductibles. They don't have the money to pay out of pocket. So they're paying good money in premiums for something they really can't use. Often they have no choice. They get sick. They have to go to the emergency room. They get admitted to the hospital, and then they're hit with these enormous out-of-pocket expenses. So it's and another thing that is increasingly a practice within this industry is restricting our access to doctors and hospitals of our choice. They're increasingly narrowing their networks. They call it narrowing their networks by kicking more and more doctors and hospitals out of their networks. So we have fewer choices. So every year we're paying more and more for our health insurance and getting less and less for it.
Okay, now centralize it on Medicare versus Medicare Advantage. You explained earlier at the beginning of the program how Medicare works, how it was paid for. Traditional Medicare, well, why don't you tell us what's the difference between traditional Medicare and Medicare Advantage? And then we'll go into exactly why people should refrain from Medicare Advantage.
Yeah, Medicare, it's also called original Medicare or traditional Medicare, differs in very important ways from Medicare Advantage and from commercial plans. The Medicare Advantage plans, it's important to understand, it's not Medicare, it's Medicare replacement. It's called Medicare Advantage, but in many cases, it certainly is not an advantage. It's something that the industry was able to get lawmakers to go along with and call it that. And they've been fooling people for now many, many years, thinking that there is some real advantage to these plans. And yes, sometimes you pay less, but you never understand what the downsides are. But first of all, back to traditional Medicare. It rarely ever uses prior authorization. You almost never get a denial from the Medicare program. It is publicly funded and publicly administrated, so the administrative costs are very, very, very low. There are no networks. Almost every doctor and hospital that practices in this country is a part of Medicare. They want to participate, so they meet certain requirements to be able to do that. So we have access to almost unlimited doctors and hospitals in this country, regardless of where we live. We can go, I'm in Philadelphia, I could, if I need care and want to get care in California, I can do that, and it'll be covered. That is not the case with Medicare Advantage. They often will refuse to pay for medically necessary care. They will often exclude the doctors and hospitals that we want to use. And if you inadvertently or knowingly go out of network, you can pay an enormous amount of money out of your own pocket for that care. So they never tell you these things. You never see these things mentioned in their advertising. And so they're able to lure people into these plans. And people don't even realize until it's frankly too late when they get sick and they realize that, my health insurer is refusing to pay for care that might save my life, might free me of pain, might I might not have access to a center of excellence or a doctor that's renowned. I may not even be able to go out of my state to get care, or in many cases, outside my county. People don't understand how restrictive these plans really are.
Now, when we talk about restrictions as well, isn't it true that if you also make the mistake to go into Medicare Advantage, getting out of it, if you decide it just isn't for you, it is almost impossible. Well, not all impossible, but very difficult to move back to traditional Medicare?
It is. It's not prohibited, but it's very difficult and it can be quite expensive. The rules are that when you become Medicare eligible, you can also buy a Medicare supplement policy. One of the downsides of traditional Medicare is the fact that it is based on insurance policies that were prevalent at the time that paid for 80% of care, and you had to pay for 20%. Back in the 1960s, that was prevalent, and healthcare was a lot less expensive than it is now. So 20% of the hospital bill in 1965 was a heck of a lot less, even adjusted for inflation, than it is now. So it's important for people, if they can afford it and they enroll in traditional or original Medicare, which I encourage everyone to do when you have that option. And everyone has that option. But it's important, if you can afford it, to get a Medicare supplement policy to cover those out-of-pockets. I've been in Medicare, original Medicare for several years now. I pay for a Medicare supplement policy, and I never have an out-of-pocket expense. All these years, I've never paid a penny out of pocket because I have this supplement policy. But it can be expensive, and people, as they get older, they're usually on fixed incomes, or many of them are. And so they see that as something that they either can't afford, or they look at Medicare Advantage and they say, well, that's a bargain. I can enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan. And they just don't pay attention to those downsides. But you can, if you are in a Medicare Advantage plan, you can leave it. But the problem is you may have a difficult time getting an affordable Medicare supplement policy. When you're first eligible for Medicare for the first 6 months, you can buy a Medicare supplement policy without going through medical underwriting. So you don't have to disclose that you've got a pre-existing condition or anything like that. But if you enroll in Medicare Advantage first and are in that plan for, say, a year, you're going to be, if you try to go back in traditional Medicare, you can, but you may have a challenging time finding an affordable Medicare supplement policy, because then you are subject to medical underwriting. And if you've got a pre-existing condition, you may have to pay considerably more for your Medicare supplement policy than you would have if you had gotten it when you were first eligible for Medicare.
Now, Wendell, isn't it true also that as far as what it costs the government on a per person basis, Medicare Advantage is the government puts out a lot more for Medicare Advantage than traditional Medicare?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Insurance companies will claim that it's a more cost-effective way of providing care to Medicare enrollees or Medicare beneficiaries. That is absolutely not true. There have been many, many, many studies that have shown that it's far more expensive. It was created under the pretense that it would save taxpayers money. And the government wouldn't have to spend as much money. It has done exactly the opposite of that, because studies have shown that every Medicare Advantage enrollee, on average, the government spends about $2,000 more a year than they would if that person was in traditional Medicare. So it's very cost ineffective. It's actually depleting the Medicare trust fund, because it's far more costly than traditional Medicare.
It almost seems like if we got rid of Medicare Advantage and put that extra money we give to Medicare Advantage into eliminating that 20% that 20% supplement, it'll actually be more cost effective.
Oh, it'd be far more cost effective. And not only that, but these companies, these that participate in the Medicare Advantage program, these private insurers like Humana, like United Healthcare, like Aetna, uh, they are cheating the government by rigging a part of the Medicare Advantage program that enables them to grab billions of dollars and
Explain that, because I think there's a method that they have, like two or three tiers, the way they bill the government per person, and they try to make it sicker for the government but less sick for what they're really paying, something to that
yeah,
effect.
yeah. Here's the game. They uh, initially. In the Medicare, the private Medicare business, the insurers were trying to avoid enrolling people who were sick, who had a pre-existing condition. We had something going on that was referred to as cherry picking and lemon dropping. These companies would go to great lengths to try to choose only the youngest and healthiest people to enroll in their Medicare Advantage plans. And if they made a mistake, if they enrolled people who had medical needs, they often would try to get rid of them. And that was called lemon dropping, canceling their policies, running them off. So Congress said, well, let's try to fix that. Let's assure these private insurance companies that we will pay them more for their sick patients than we have in the past. So when that was created, it created something called a risk scoring system. The government did, so that, for example, if I had diabetes, I don't, but if I had diabetes, I would be the government would pay my insurance company more, my Medicare Advantage company more, because I have diabetes. What the insurers have done is manufacture illnesses for a lot of people, and it's called manipulating this risk scoring system. And it's been estimated by MedPAC, which is the entity that advises the federal government on Medicare, that this year alone, the government will be overpaying these companies at least $84 billion
For 1 year.
for 1 year. Some estimates are considerably higher than that. I've seen estimates of $140 billion a year. We're talking about 1 year now. If you look over 10 years, you're talking over $1 trillion that we are wasting. We're spending on these companies, giving them money that they're not entitled to because of the way they're cheating us.
And that goes right into the pockets of the shareholders and the bonuses.
Yeah,
so it's a wealth transfer. One last question. What I know you support Medicare for All. How do we get there? How do we start working on, first of all, getting people to realize that Medicare Advantage is just not an advantage for them? I know you've been doing a lot of work with the newsletter that you have, which we're going to put in the blog as well. You have a great newsletter, Healthcare Uncovered. Great newsletter, Healthcare Uncovered on Substack. It's a learning experience when you go over to that Substack. But please tell us, what can we do?
Well, part of it is what you and I are doing, which is educating the public, and we can't rely on the traditional media to do that work for us for a variety of reasons. Increasingly, though, reporters are covering Medicare Advantage in ways that they haven't before, but we need to make sure people understand how they're getting swindled by big insurance companies, where our money goes, whether we're paying premiums or taxes. They're using our money, and you're right, it's wealth transfer from us to already wealthy shareholders. So a lot of the things we have to do is foundational. We need to stop some of the things that's going on right now to keep Medicare Advantage from being even more involved in our lives and taking more and more money from the government. We need to expose, as we do, how these companies behave. So my goal, and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, is to make these companies toxic for politicians, for shareholders. I don't want politicians to take any money from these companies or their trade associations. I don't want people to invest in these companies. So we've got to do that work. And we've got to help people do a better job than we've done in the past of helping people understand the benefits of improving and expanding the Medicare program to cover all of us. We've tried that. We've not done as good a job as we need to because the insurance industry, and I know this from having worked there, they're really, really, really good at scaring people, at lying, at misleading us. So we've got to anticipate what they're going to be doing, be ready for it the next time the stars align. And I think we will have that opportunity. We need to have national political leaders who stand up for it, who campaign on it. And we need to support candidates at all levels who support expanding and improving and expanding the Medicare program.
Now, the last question I always ask is, what should I have asked you that I forgot to ask you or that I didn't ask?
Just about how big these corporations are. We're talking about mega corporations that not only these days provide insurance, but they're getting deeper and deeper into healthcare delivery. United Healthcare is just one part of this giant corporation called United Health Group that encompasses over nearly 3,000 subsidiaries. Most of them are physician practices and clinics. So they're not just insurance companies. They are getting deeper and deeper into healthcare delivery, which means that even if we're not enrolled in one of their health plans, we're still going to have to pay them money in some way. So they've gotten deeper into our lives. And United Health Group is the third largest company in America now in terms of revenue. So I want people to know these are massive. And Donald Trump got it right a few days ago. He called them big, bad, money-sucking companies. And that's one thing I agree with him on. At least he's saying it, and I'm saying that more and more people who identify as Republicans are beginning to see this. We've just got to tell this story more and more.
Wendell Potter, Healthcare Uncovered is the newsletter. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to another edition of Egberto Off the Record. Today, I'm honored once again to speak to a good guy, a great writer, somebody that has really gives some substance here to Substack. I'm talking about, of course, Walter Ryan. Walter is the publisher of I'd Rather Be Writing. And you know what? It's good that he'd rather be writing. Anyway, we're going to discuss quite a bit today. So beforehand, let's introduce Senor Ryan. Talk to me. How you doing this morning?
Oh, Alberto, such a pleasure to be here. And I've been thinking about you a lot. And there's just been so much going on. And so I appreciate having this opportunity to talk to you again. And let's just get into it and keep going. Well, thank you for all you do. I just want to say that.
Well, likewise, man. Likewise. Let me tell you, today, my heart's heavy for several reasons. But of course, what we got is the destruction of the life of a 22-year-old. What I think and I think this is because of the state of our politics, and it pains me. I have a 34-year-old daughter. That's not too far removed, 12 years from a 22-year-old. I can't imagine the pain, irrespective of the ideological bent of that parent. I know how I would feel if that was my daughter, and that's that family's strife right now, that their son is responsible for taking another one's life, and especially in this climate where it's a life that has connection with a president that probably is going to be seeking some sort of a major retributions. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is just everything that's going on right now. And I did a talk yesterday. I told a friend of mine, it's like everybody just has to get the temperature down. Everybody's making these assumptions. And a thing that's on my mind, we all denounce this violence. The left has been trying to stop this gun violence for my entire life, And then earlier in this week, what do we have? We have a president who's sending out memes of pictures of himself in front of burning American cities, And then we get to these acts of violence happening. And a responsible president, a responsible leader of any kind would say, in a moment like this of tragedy, we can't continue to fan these flames of hatred and violence. We have to tone it down. And it's critical that we don't cast blame because we don't know what happened. We don't have an investigation. But this administration, they started off by firing the air traffic controllers, and then we had mid-air collisions. And then they've gone through and they've fired high-ranking generals. They're firing people not based on merit, but because of race and gender. They're firing all these people. And so we don't have, the investigations that go into these things are, all of our best investigators have been gone, and so, yeah, a person's life is, multiple people's lives are, it's a wave effect. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
You made a whole lot of commentary about the condition that we're in with the government, pretty much mismanaged because we've lost a lot of the former knowledge. That is a problem. Now, above and beyond that, what we're seeing right now with the polarization, unfortunately, in my opinion, this polarization has a lot to do with leadership. I know just as much as I do.
Yes.
You speak to a lot of people all over the country. And the people all over the country are not as polarized as the media would have you believe. It's not as polarized as until they insert issues to create said polarizations. Your thoughts on that?
That's very, very important to say. And I think it's really dangerous. And even this morning, something as easy as when I dropped off my kids at school, I'm driving through my neighborhood. And it's like, okay, this is still a neighborhood. There's still houses here. There's people still going through their lives. We have to be really aware of the toxic nature of our social media. And even if you're in good spaces on your social media pages, there's still the stuff gets through, the negative stuff comes through. And so you do have to just get out and talk to actual real people, because it's easy to read the news or listen to how things are presented in the news, and you get an inaccurate impression of what people are thinking. And right now, I've been going on Substack and talking to wonderful people like you, but in your real life too, if you talk to people, you realize, yes, we are more united in this. This morning, I saw a beautiful speech by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and it just brought tears to my eyes because she's at this massive stadium. She's leading with kindness, hopefulness for the future. And it's just that we need that contrast. We need more of our former representatives to come forward and just demonstrate what leading with a steady hand is like. I really missed Biden over these last couple of days, because he would have, we need that responsible adult figure who calms down the nation and says, don't be carried away by your speculation, because we don't have all the facts of the things that have happened. Don't make all these assumptions about things. But then immediately after that, yesterday, there were 5 credible terrorist calls and threats against historically Black universities. That hasn't been much in the news. So we're seeing the ramifications of this irresponsible and reckless way of handling, these things that are going on. And it's just, we need to have more people talking about toning the temperature down. And like you said, the more you're on social media, the more you kind of get incensed, thinking, no matter what your political ideology is, it makes you concerned, it makes you fretful, anxious. Get outside and talk to people. That's exactly right. We're not as divided as...
Let me add to that, because I think you brought up an important point. Social media isn't America, or social media isn't the total existence. And I can make myself look a lot more important and impressive on social media than I am. And that is what most influencers do. They make, because one person is able individually to get so many eyeballs, you can give the impression that is what reality is. And it is something that we really have to work on. We have to really educate not the influencers, but educate the people that they are just seeing things through one avenue of millions. And that one... Yep. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I've been writing a long time, so I know what it's like when I'm getting bombed by bot accounts. And I've seen recently, I noticed that my work is being aggregated on this conservative page. So I jumped over there and I just saw I read the comments. And I'm coming at this from experience. It's like, well, these are all fake comments. These are all just written. It's the same because they repeat. It's like the robot phrases kind of repeat.
Right.
And part of my job is to recognize AI writing anyway. So I'm like, well, this is all false. But a person who hasn't been educated in that, they wouldn't recognize that. And if you're reading, because they'll get 500 comments, there'll be hostilities, there'll be all kinds of things in there. But a person who's not educated, like maybe my daughter or something, she were to read that, she'd think this is what people actually think. And you just have to explain it's like this. And that appears on all the social media sites where they bomb it. I call it bot swarms. They bomb any kind of narrative they don't want. They want it buried. So they'll bomb it with all these hostile attacks. And then a lot of the memes and stuff you're seeing are not real either. They're not coming from real people. So they're trying to network or change how we think. It's social engineering. They're trying to brainwash us through these social media memes by presenting themselves as real people, and they're not real profiles. They're coming from who knows where. We have to be on the lookout.
Actually, they're well paid, and this is what is actually being done. The thing about it, and I don't know how much of my economic political shows that you ever seen, but when you reach a point in an economic system known as end state capitalism, where the masses are started to educate themselves, it is imperative then for you to dumb them down. It is imperative for you to dumb them down because you start to ask the specific questions as to why. Why am I working so hard for so little? Why am I not? Why can't I get health care that every other country has? People start to ask these questions, and when there are no good answers, the only thing you can do is ensure that there's chaos. And we have an industry designed to create chaos. And I think some of the writing that you do, what I do, what others do, Weems and our good friends do along the way, is to try to open people's minds to just not accept this, because there is, in fact, a better way. And the better way is that, I talk about flesh and blood a whole lot. I'm not just behind these cameras, and I'm sure you're not. I try to actually physically meet people. People realize that you're not just something that you write or not what they think about you, but that I can actually talk to you. When I'm on the radio, I make sure I make sure in as much as I don't know where you are ideologically. And it's good that I don't know where you are ideologically, right? Because it says something. I see you as a human being, right? And I have no problem. Hey, Walter, let's have a chat. And I try to do that on my show. As left as I am, everybody on my show is welcome, right? And I want that. Today we had an interesting commentary, Walter, and it went this way. I am very upset, decidedly so, about the coverage of Charlie Kirk. Because I think what they're trying to do in many of the media, and in fact, some of the media one would consider progressive, I think this is in order to try to hold on to Trump, not shutting, making life difficult for them, is they are just bringing up, they're making Charlie Kirk be what he wasn't. I hate that Charlie Kirk was murdered. I think it's a sad day in America that Charlie Kirk was murdered.
Yeah.
But to deify him the way the mainstream media is doing, I think it's just as bad.
Yes.
And before I get any further, I would love to see if that is the sort of, if that is where if you're in similar position or not. I'm curious.
Yes, absolutely. What's frustrating me, and it's obvious because he's had this just deplorable idea. I mean, when asked about, school shootings, he made his comment that in order to have, his belief was that these things are necessary, that we have to sacrifice some of our population in order to maintain our ideology. And I think what we need is a cultural awakening here. That's an unacceptable thing. And it's not new. I mean, it's unacceptable to say we have to sacrifice some people because that's just accepting it might be you or it might be your kids. We can't go through life like this saying, well, a couple of us are going to have to die to keep our way of life alive. That means your way of life is corrupt. If it requires people to die, your way of life is corrupt. And I was just reflecting, there was a story called The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, written in 1948. I don't know if you know it, but every English major has read this story. And it's about a little town in the United States, and they have a lottery every year. And they're all talking about how important this is and its tradition. And the one of the loudest advocates for the lottery is the one who wins. But instead of being happy, she starts screaming because they stone her to death. And that's what their tradition is. They just sacrifice somebody in their town once a year. And this is the lot. The United States is the lottery. This was 1948. And it's been that way forever. You don't have a chance to succeed here. This is not a country. Everything they've told you is a lie. If you're not in that elite ruling class, you're cannon fodder. You're the one they're going to sacrifice. And when they say we have to make some sacrifices so we can maintain a way of life, they never intend it to mean them. It's always us they intend to sacrifice. They're quite happy to sacrifice us. And so that's what has to change. We have to, and this is going to be a big awakening. It's a big awakening for people to understand this. We have to just put that whole thing aside. And that's a major part of our identity. We have to embrace a future where everybody is protected. Everybody is treated with the same rights and privileges and basic dignity, no matter how much money they have, no matter how much of a platform they have. Nobody should be killed. And if people are going to sit there and attack me then and say I'm some sort of hate monger for saying that, I don't understand their contorted logic that they're using. Because all I'm saying is that everybody deserves to be protected and safe and have the same chance at prosperity and the pursuit of happiness.
It's called projection.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. In other words, they project themselves and their words onto you, and then they try to make it that way. I'm glad. Look, I didn't know that's what you were going to say, but I got to say that I'm happy to hear that that you're saying what you're saying. And interestingly, yes, we have to get together. Now, the governor Governor Cox of Utah, he said something very important, and his speech at the end of, I don't know if you've watched the press conference yet. I've already posted the first part of the press conference. I'm going to go process the second part of the press conference with a heavy commentary. And let me explain what I mean by that. The governor went ahead and said, he spoke well about what we need to do. We need to get together. There are Republicans and Democrats in Utah that are getting together and speaking. Great thing. And he said, but you know what reminds me the most? Something that Charlie Kirk said. You need to forgive. And the worst thing your enemy hates is that you forgive, but you need to forgive. And he also used another phrase that Charlie Kirk uses that was actually a good phrase. It was a good phrase outside of the context of everything that he stood for. And I think the error that the governor made in that, if you are looking for unity, if you're trying to unite people, even as this involved the killer and the victim of the killing of that person that was so diabolical, I think it is important that you don't use the commentary of that person when you're talking about unity. What has happened has been caused by the current polarization. Do not use the polarized as an example of how we bring unity into the country. And I think with all the good things that governor said, that's the mistake that he made.
Yeah, it's upsetting how these narratives get changed, and everybody has a seed of truth in their ideology, and then there's places where they get confused, and then there's things that they're willing to tolerate. The idea of forgiveness is important, but that doesn't mean that we can allow people to continue abusing children, for example.
Right.
You don't say I forgive you and then let them continue doing what they're doing. And sometimes these things, they get mixed up. People will talk about things like venerated traditions. They'll kind of disguise what they're trying to do. And it's like, well, what actually is the venerated tradition? And then it turns out to be something awful.
Mm-hmm.
The word tradition is a good thing, but the actual thing we're talking about is different. And the main thing I've been emphasizing with people is everybody's jumped to a conclusion. They've already jumped to a narrative about this, this horrible, horrible act of violence. We don't know what was behind it and motivated it, and we won't, and we might never know, but people are, if they're assuming one group is responsible and then turning that assumption into hate and then turning that hate into attacks. I mean, there were 5 attacks on historically Black universities. They had nothing to do with this.
Right.
And that should be denounced by everybody. And I haven't seen that denounced in the media yet. I've seen a lot of people get fired because they said, well, actually, I disagree with what Charlie Kirk said, which you should be allowed, right? The whole point is we should be allowed to say what we want, And if I disagree with him, I should be able to say that and not lose my job, right? It doesn't matter, if something happened to him. I still disagree with what he said. But why is it that that's still where the narrative is controlled and we are not denouncing these real acts? I mean, it's not talk anymore. Real threats against historically Black universities. I've received more threats. I had some death threats just the other day from different groups. I'm not responsible here. This isn't my thing. So this cultivating the hatred here, like you were saying, rather than toning it down, it's like, look, we have to do the investigation. We have to rely on reasonable thought, not reactionary emotions with the assumption because of the optics of something. That's not evidence. The evidence is what the forensics teams find. And I'm not a forensic investigator. So I shouldn't determine or think that I know who was responsible and why. And I wish our whole nation would start to figure that out. But some groups want the narrative more than the facts. And that's, I think, ties into what you were saying.
It is sad because whereas we had that murder 2 days ago, we also had on that same day, I think 3 or 4 students in Colorado get shot and the perpetrator committed suicide. And all of that's the gun violence that we speak about all of the time. And it is sad that what gets coverage is Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Charlie Kirk, the promoter of hate, gets a lot of coverage. And worse, that somebody like Matthew Dowd loses his job a couple days ago because he happened to tell the truth, that a sportscaster lost their job because they happened to tell the truth. And the reason they do that is, hey, they can do it and get away with it because it is Charlie Kirk, and they can say it was accompanied with a murder. But it's also another message, a sort of a pseudo message being sent that we can fire you if you say the things we don't want you to say. And this is just training wheels, because this put the fear in you, and they don't get repercussions, because everybody's going to be, not everybody, because on my FM radio show, I made it clear that Charlie Kirk I'm sorry that he got shot, but he is exactly who we said he is, evil, diabolical person. But continue, my brother.
Yeah, and I want to compare what you're saying too to the way the media covered Melissa Hortman's assassination.
Here you go.
And it's the exact same thing. The immediate aftermath of that, the right was all over social media. They were all over the news claiming it was the left. And it's like the left doesn't go around assassinating people. We're the side that's against gun violence. That's our whole ideology. Meanwhile, the right's got machine gun lapels that they like to wear. And you just look at some of these candidates running for office now. They're holding guns in their political campaign ads. I've seen various ads that just make me sick, where they're acting like they're targeting the other. They're like this conversation of violence is entirely coming from the right.
Right.
And then we have Melissa Hortman gets killed and assassinated by a man who pretended to be a police officer. He was disguised as a police officer, didn't identify himself, which is another issue, because we've got people that claim to be law enforcement agents covering up their faces, refusing to show identification, abducting people. They might actually be law enforcement agents, but there are some too that are just pretending to be law enforcement agents so they can rape women. And this is the thing that nobody's addressing. This is an issue that should be stopped, because it's being done with, under the camouflage of, government approval. So not the ones that are not actually involved with the law enforcement. But this is the problem you get when you allow law enforcement agents to cover up their face and not show ID. But so that was going on. Then the right, while the left sits there and tries to process their trauma and waits for the facts to come out, the right is already pushing their narrative, because the only thing they want to do is have an excuse to physically attack the people on the left. And they did it. They did it with their threats against the historically black universities. So this kind of has to cut through the narrative that the media is presenting. They're still trying to tell the left to be careful with your rhetoric. The only thing they're covering is they're firing journalists who say, actually, that guy spoke a lot of hate speech. And they're disregarding these stories about terrorist attacks on historically black universities. Once the information emerged about Melissa Hortman's assassin and his political affiliations, which were on the right, that news story disappeared. Because once the facts emerge that counter the narrative the right wants to impose on us in pursuit of their calls to hostility and harassment and violence, and I know I've endured it. My family is an immigrant family, so we've been enduring hostile acts from people on the right for as long as my children have been alive. That's just a fact. And it's never mentioned in the media. And the second the facts emerge that start to undermine that narrative, that whole political movement just changes topics, moves to something else, and finds another way to cultivate hatred and violence against the left. And it's just unfair. That's why we're on. That's the reason I'm on these shows talking to wonderful people like you, because we have to counter this social engineering that the media is involved with right now.
I'm glad that you said that the mainstream media is in fact compromised. Again, like I said, quite a few people got laid off over the last 2 days. Now, it's interesting because one of the things that I did recently is there was a terrorism expert on, and the terrorism expert came out and said, as he's talking about these issues, he then said that most of the violence historically in this country has come from the left. Which got me pretty upset, because as somebody who follows this history for quite some time, it was clear to me that has come from where again? The right. In fact, from the inception of our country, slavery was a right thing, a rightward thing. And so I went and did some research and came out with the whole list of the different movements that involved the right. And I got some that I even forgot about. The right has been so violent through this country. And interestingly, even whenever there is violence on the left, it always seemed to be a violence trying to correct the ills of the right. Violence to protect slavery, violence to free folks from slavery, violence from, it always is that kind of a reaction. Even when you look at groups like Antifa, what is anti-fascist? I mean, you look at what those movements are actually fighting against, albeit sometimes with violence, which, again, we should try to, as much as possible, get away from that. So, I mean, the mainstream media, by pushing the narratives they push, make people believe things that aren't really so.
Absolutely. And I've done my research on that too. And it is. The ones I saw said, when it's the politically motivated violence, it's upwards of 90% of the time, it's the right responsible for these things. You look at, but it's just, and the reason the general public doesn't know this is, again, that propaganda mechanism, which is exactly what we were talking about. The facts have left the building. We have a whole political movement that dismisses the advice and the opinions of experts. It encourages people not to read. We have books banned. We don't teach Black history. If we taught Black history, people would see it's the right-wing assaults that are causing all the violence. The Ku Klux Klan used to blow up churches. It's just the most horrible thing. All these things are just so terrible. And then, like, getting back to Black Lives Matter, those were overwhelmingly peaceful. And they were overwhelmingly peaceful demonstrations. And if they became violent, it was because white supremacist agitators were bussed to the places and began attacking people. There's a video you can find online, and it's this guy who looks like he's in riot gear. He's walking through a neighborhood just breaking windows.
That was Wisconsin. I remember when I'm not Minnesota, I think it was. Or Wisconsin. Yeah.
I think it was Minnesota. I think it was in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I was a member of Black Lives Matter, and again, I was there at its inception. In fact, when we pretty much confronted our good friend ran for president. What's wrong with me? Our revolution. Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
we were in Minnesota. We were in Arizona, and during that, I think it was during the 2016. I don't remember which one it was specifically. But Bernie came out, and Bernie made no mention of anything that needed, racial justice was not a part of his speech. So they actually came in and they protested that, and that was about 3,000 people in the Netroots Nation Hall. And by the time we had the big rally down below with over 15,000 people, Bernie wisely had changed his speech to also include that as something that we as a country needed to work on. People sit down and think this is a violent thing. These are people working together to make a better country. That's all it's all about.
Yeah, and it is always easier to destroy something than it is to build something. And that's why the right has so much power, because all they do is destroy. Everything that they have is to just tear things down. A good trick I always use with people, because we've all been in these situations with groups of friends where one person's like, let's do this. And they're like, nah. And they seem to kind of gain in stature because they just they tread on everything. And so the trick they say there is, okay, what do you propose that we do?
Right.
And, and then they don't have anything or they refuse to offer anything. And at that point, it's exposed. And so much of the country, and I understand that people are frustrated. I understand. I'm frustrated too. You can't, it's hard to pay the bills, but we got to recognize where this pressure is coming from. And this division that's being caused. So many people, and they're willing to assume they're afraid of certain groups. They assume these groups are the ones that are responsible. And you just have to reach out to your neighbor, and say, look, I want groceries to be cheaper too. How do we do that? And then they're all afraid of things like socialism. And it's like, well, that word doesn't even mean anything based on the way you're using it. Why shouldn't the government actually work for us? Don't we respect the military? Isn't the military there to defend us? Isn't that an example of the government working for us? And we have to make those because people are so indoctrinated with these beliefs. And the way the media changes everything, where they divert away from the truth and they figure out a way to kind of feed into these historical strains of hatred that have run through since the beginning of this nation, and they capitalize on that. It's much harder. I mean, it's harder to teach a child to do math than it is to just tell that kid not to do math, right? It's like, wouldn't it be better to go outside and play? I mean, it's really hard to build anything. So that's why they have the advantages. But we're the ones that offer the pathway to prosperity. So people better start listening.
And we're the ones who ask them, please learn how to critically think, because if you start to think critically, then work becomes so much easier and you less taking advantage of it. Okay, Walter, give me a closer a context. Give a context to our audience. Tell our audience, where should we be going from here? I have a short commentary I want to end with, but I want to hear your point of view.
Well, I just want to encourage people to just take the temperature down and don't react. Because everybody, you see this, something awful happens. We've all been in this. I've been in a state of, just processing my trauma. I haven't slept good the last 2 nights. And, I don't like hate speech, but more than not liking hate speech, I don't want to see violence. And this nation is becoming violent and lawless. And we've had multiple high-profile assassinations and assassination attempts, and it seems to be going along with this regime. Things are more and more, things are getting more hostile. And I know that people are frustrated and scared, but you really have to sit there and say, look, don't take action because you don't know what's going on. And if you take the wrong action, you might hurt an ally. You might be responsible for hurting somebody who's innocent, So above all things, remember that. And don't respond with violence because it's not going to make things any better. Just tone it down, demand for investigations, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And like you said before, Alberto, reach out to your neighbors and you'll find we all want the same things. We want our kids protected. We don't want them getting scooped up by billionaires who have pedophile islands somewhere to be playthings. We don't want that. Let's keep having transparency. We keep the demands for that. Let's hold the bad actors accountable, but first, let's find out who they are with evidence and critical thinking and just try to tone things down.
I echo absolutely everything that you've just said, Walter, and I want to add a little analytics to this. And I want to tell the folks that are listening to us, don't allow labels to have you fear critically thinking. For those of you who watch my program, I talk a lot about end stage capitalism. And while this conversation between Walter and us here is not about that specifically, I just want to say that it plays a part in it. In end stage capitalism, it's the part where this economic system mathematically has eaten itself and it now has to come for you. And we can discuss this on other platforms where this would become more evident. But in doing so, the only way having a mass population for that system to continue a bit longer, it'll fall on its face. Mathematically speaking, it's unsustainable. It'll fall on its place, but it can last a little bit longer if I can keep all of you that are listening right now and all of us in the country in a perpetual state of turmoil and polarization against each other. It is in the benefit of that small few that runs this system that we fight among each other. That is the only way it survives in its current form for a bit longer, because it is dead. It cannot survive. But a few more years, a few more decades.
Yeah. 40 trillion in debt. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, we have to critically think to ensure that we understand what's going on here. And in that process, we can actually turn things about. Forget about the words socialism and all of that. There is enough richness in this country for all of us to do well, and we don't need to kill each other for it. It's all there for all of us. Love, as corny as it sounds, if you can simply look at another person, whether you agree with them or not, and learn how to love that person.
Yeah.
I think, go ahead.
Or just not be angry. Just not be angry. Just take a second, and just say, okay, like some of the comments here where they're just like, I know people are frustrated, but I'm not the one who did the things to you. It wasn't me. It's another system. I'm working with everybody, with Alberto and everybody in the comments. I want your lives to be better too. I want that for you. And so let's just take a breath and please extend me a little bit of courtesy of thinking maybe that's actually true. Maybe he does want that. Maybe if we did this other path, everybody's lives would get better, including yours. Everybody's would. That's what we want. Because what we have now is a mess. And we all can agree that, right? It's been a mess for a long time.
And the message that we are promoting is a message for all, not a message for some. Our message and what we want is for all, not for some. And with that, I want to give Walter a big thank you. I respect the work that you do. I watch many of your lives. I like the way that you come across. And I think you are a necessary presence right here on Substack. So folks, please go ahead and check out Walter's I'd rather be writing. Subscribe to that baby. And if you want to subscribe to me, it is Egberto Off the Record. Walter, thank you so kindly for having been here on Egberto Off the Record.
Thank you so much, Egberto. Cuídate.
Cuídate. Ciao.
All of our country's problems. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.